The morning sun crept gently through the stained glass windows of the old Victorian home on Maplewood Drive, casting warm rays across the polished hardwood floors. Carl Benson, a man of simple habits and concrete convictions, stood at the kitchen counter, sipping his black coffee, watching his wife glide between the stove and sink like a well-rehearsed dancer in a familiar waltz. Marilyn was always graceful, always poised. Even in slippers and a worn housecoat, she carried herself like someone born with elegance stitched into her bones. Her short curls bounced with each step, and her soft humming filled the silence between the clinking of dishes and the gurgle of the percolator. Carl admired her, though he rarely said it. In his world, love was action, fixing things around the house, keeping food on the table, staying faithful. "Smells good," he said, pulling out a chair at the small breakfast nook. "That your apple cinnamon thing?" Marilyn smiled without turning. "Only your favorite. Thought I'd make it since you slept in for once." He chuckled. "A man deserves rest on Sunday, don't he?" "Sure does," she replied. "Especially one who worked himself half to death all week." Their marriage, to an outsider, was picturesque, the kind of love old folks in town pointed to when talking about how things used to be. Carl ran a small but profitable construction business. His crew respected him. The town trusted him. Marilyn, meanwhile, owned and operated Marilyn's Touch, the most popular hair studio in Everwood and probably the entire county. Her clients ranged from high school cheerleaders to retired judges' wives. And somehow, she made every single one of them feel seen, special. They'd been married 5 years. No children yet, though it wasn't for lack of trying. Carl chalked it up to bad timing. Marilyn always said God had his reasons. They didn't talk much about fertility or tests. Carl came from a generation of men who believed you didn't poke at a problem unless it bled. He loved her, plain and simple. Maybe not in the roses on the pillow kind of way, but in the way he got her car washed without her asking. The way he warmed up the truck in the winter so she wouldn't have to sit in the cold. The way he watched her when she didn't know he was watching. She had a quiet power to her, an independence he both admired and, in his quieter moments, resented. Carl had been raised to believe a man was supposed to lead, to provide. Yet here was Marilyn, pulling in nearly as much income as he did, maybe more some months, with her scissors and blow dryers and color charts. It wasn't that he minded her success. He was proud of her. But every now and then, a voice inside him whispered that the roles had reversed, and he didn't know quite how to feel about that. Their home reflected their life, orderly, classic, untouched by the trends of younger couples. The house had belonged to a doctor in the 1920s, and the Bensons kept most of its original charm. Crown molding, crystal doorknobs, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs. Marilyn added touches of color, floral curtains, oil paintings, ceramic vases, and Carl took care of the bones. The roof, the plumbing, the ancient furnace that coughed every November. They didn't throw parties often, but when they did, everyone came. Friends would sip iced tea under the pergola in the backyard, or warm cider by the fireplace during Christmas. People admired them, envied them. The Bensons were solid, unshakable, or so it seemed. That particular morning, while Carl buttered his toast and scrolled mindlessly through the news on his phone, Marilyn mentioned she'd be heading to the salon after lunch to check on a shipment of product. Carl grunted in acknowledgement, still stuck on a story about rising gas prices. Then she said something that stuck with him more than it should have. "I was thinking," she said, pouring herself a second cup of coffee, "we ought to clean out the attic next weekend." He looked up. "Attic?" She nodded. "There's boxes up there from before we moved in. Haven't touched them since. Thought maybe it's time." Carl squinted, suspicion flickering across his face. "You always said you didn't keep much from before." Marilyn paused, just a beat too long, then smiled. "Exactly. That's why we can finally toss it." He shrugged, letting it go. But something in her tone, in the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, made a note in his mind. He'd never been one to pry, but he wasn't stupid, either. Marilyn had always been careful about her past, her roots, even her name. He chalked it up to trauma, or maybe shame. She once told him her parents died when she was young, and she had no siblings, no family left. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? Still, that smile, that pause. Later that day, while Marilyn left for the salon and Carl headed to the garage to fix a busted pressure washer, the attic lingered in the back of his mind like a whisper. And before the weekend was out, he'd find the box she never meant for him to see. Sunday afternoon settled into a quiet lull. The clouds drifted slow and aimless over Everwood, and the buzz of lawnmowers echoed in the distance like background music to small-town life. Carl stood alone in the garage, elbow deep in the guts of his stubborn pressure washer. He was sweating, swearing under his breath, and trying not to let Marilyn's earlier comment about the attic distract him. But it lingered like a mosquito in his ear. He wiped his hands on a rag and stared up at the corner window of the attic, half covered in dust and ivy. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she just wanted to reorganize. But the pause in her voice earlier had been wrong. Like she wasn't just talking about boxes. He made up his mind then, half out of curiosity, half out of spite, and stepped into the house. The attic stairs groaned under his boots. It smelled of old wood and insulation, that musty scent of forgotten years. The light from the tiny gable window barely touched the corners of the room. Carl switched on the bare hanging bulb, casting a weak yellow glow across rows of boxes. Most were labeled in Marilyn's neat cursive: Zmaz, summer clothes, old towels. Nothing suspicious. Then, in the far corner, tucked behind a trunk full of tangled string lights and fake garland, he saw it, a wooden chest, darker than the rest, with scuffed corners and a dull brass latch. No label, no dust. It didn't look like something that had been up there long. Carl knelt slowly, heart beating louder than it should. He popped the latch open with his thumb. No lock, no resistance. The lid creaked as it opened. Inside, a stack of old photo albums, a manila folder full of papers, a small bundle of medals and school ribbons. He picked up the top photo album and opened it to the first page. What he saw made his stomach tighten. There, smiling up at him, was a boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, dark-skinned, gap-toothed, eyes bright and full of life. Carl flipped through more pages. The boy grew older with each photo. Same face, same eyes, same smile. The eyes. Carl blinked, leaning in. Those eyes weren't just familiar. They were identical. High cheekbones, the slight curve of the brow, a dimple on the left side only when smiling. He'd stared into those same eyes every morning for the past 5 years. He turned the photo over. Faded ink scratched across the back. Our son, Marcus, age 13. Carl sat back on his heels, breath caught in his throat. Marcus? He flipped further. Middle school graduation, a picture with an older woman labeled Grandma Joe, then high school photos. The boy was tall now, handsome, still smiling. Still, unmistakably Marilyn. No, Carl whispered. No, that's not. He opened the folder next. Inside, a high school diploma issued to Marcus Holloway, transcripts from a cosmetology program in New York. Then a thick packet labeled hormone therapy timeline, with dates stretching back nearly a decade. A surgical consent form, recovery instructions, a printed email thread between a doctor and someone named him Holloway about top surgery and gender confirmation. Carl dropped the papers as if they were burning him. His legs wobbled beneath him as he stood. The attic felt smaller, tighter. His mouth was dry. He looked around, as though someone else might be hiding in the shadows, watching him unravel. His wife, the woman he loved, slept beside, kissed good night for years, had been born Marcus Holloway. He staggered down the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The house was silent. The refrigerator hummed. A clock ticked in the hallway. Carl walked into the living room, grabbed the whiskey decanter off the sideboard, and poured 2 fingers into a tumbler with trembling hands. He sat down hard on the couch, staring at nothing. Pictures flashed through his mind. Their wedding day, her smiling in that cream-lace dress with the long veil, the way she used to curl up next to him on the couch during thunderstorms, her laugh when he messed up pancake batter. All of it now filtered through the image of a boy named Marcus with her eyes. He drank. Anger crept in, slow and acidic. How could she look him in the eye, lie to him every day, pretend she was something she wasn't? 5 years of marriage. 5 years of being called her husband. 5 years of being made a fool. He slammed the glass on the table and paced the room, chest rising and falling like a man who just found out the world he built was made of ash. Then the front door creaked open. Carl froze. "Hey," Marilyn's voice called gently. "I'm home. Got your favorite donuts from Grady's." She stepped into the room, her smile fading the moment she saw his face. "Carl, what's wrong?" He didn't answer. He just stared. And in that moment, standing under the same roof they shared for years, Carl Benson no longer recognized the woman in front of him. Marilyn stepped into the living room slowly, still holding the paper bag of donuts in one hand, keys dangling from the other. Her smile faltered, then vanished completely when she saw Carl's posture. Rigid, arms crossed over his chest like a dam holding back a flood. The room was dim. The curtains hadn't been opened. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the coffee table. The air felt thick like the moment right before a tornado touches down. "Carl," she asked again, softer now. "What's going on?" His eyes didn't blink, didn't move. He was staring through her, or maybe straight into her. Either way, it made her shiver. He finally spoke, his voice low, cracked, and trembling with restrained rage. "Who the hell is Marcus?" Marilyn froze. The donut bag slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her breath caught, like a splinter in her throat. For a split second, she considered lying, playing dumb, pretending. But then she saw it, the open folder on the coffee table. The photos, the documents. Her old life laid bare like a confession already signed in ink. "You went in the attic," she whispered. Carl didn't move. "You told me there wasn't anything worth keeping up there. Just old towels and decorations." I meant to tell you," she said quickly, stepping forward with her palms open. "Carl, I swear to you I was going to—" "Don't," he snapped, voice sharp like a whip. "Don't you lie to me again." "I'm not lying," Marilyn said. I didn't know how to tell you. And once we were married, it just got harder and harder." Carl scoffed bitterly. "Harder to lie? Or harder to live with yourself?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She stood there, hands shaking at her sides, heart thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I was scared," she said. "You have no idea how scared. I thought if I told you, you'd leave. You'd hate me." He stood up slowly, towering over the coffee table like a judge rising from the bench. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" he said, voice low and dangerous. 5 years. 5 years I thought I knew the woman I married. You smiled in my face every damn day and never told me the truth. I never lied about loving you," she pleaded. "Carl, you have to believe that. I love you. I always have." He shook his head. "You don't love someone and keep something like this from them. You don't look them in the eye every night and sleep in their bed while pretending to be someone else." "I wasn't pretending," she snapped louder now. "I am Marilyn. I've been Marilyn for most of my adult life. Just because I was born a man," Carl cut in. "You were born a man." "I was born in the wrong body," she corrected, fire rising in her voice. "That's not the same thing. I have spent years trying to be myself, trying to live honestly. You don't get to erase that with one word." He took a step toward her, fists clenched. "You robbed me," he said, "of choice, of truth, of the life I thought we were building. Kids, a future, all of it fake." Marilyn flinched. "It wasn't fake. It was real to me." "Real?" He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Then what the hell was Marcus?" "That name doesn't belong to me anymore," she whispered. "It hasn't in a long time." Carl moved fast then. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the whiskey glass jump and fall over, spilling across the photos. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. "You disgust me," he said, voice like gravel. "You tricked me into loving you." "I didn't trick you," she shouted back, the dam finally breaking. "I loved you with everything I had. I made you better. I supported you. I chose you. And you would have never chosen me if you knew the truth, because you're too afraid of what it says about you." That hit him like a slap. "Don't you turn this on me," he growled. "Don't you dare." "I'm not turning anything," she said, voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. "I'm telling you that you, not me, are the one who can't handle this. You're the one who equates biology with humanity. Who thinks chromosomes make a woman instead of soul, heart, love? He stepped forward again, too close now. She backed up a step, her shoulders hitting the edge of the wall behind her. You've been lying since day one, he whispered. You knew what you were doing. You knew it would kill me if I found out. And yet here I am, she said, eyes brimming, telling the truth anyway. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the slow dripping of whiskey hitting the floor. Then Carl turned away, pacing toward the fireplace, rubbing the back of his neck with both hands. Marilyn stepped forward cautiously. Carl, she said gently, please, we can go to counseling. We can talk this through. I never wanted to hurt you. He spun around, eyes blazing. You already did. She didn't see it coming. His hand swiped across the mantel, sending a porcelain vase crashing to the ground. Shards flew. The noise was deafening. Stop, she cried. Stop it, Carl. He advanced, rage overtaking his features. You made me a damn joke in front of everyone, he roared. Sleeping next to me, whispering I love you, when you were never even a real woman. That was it. Marilyn stepped forward, slapped him across the face so hard his head snapped sideways. The room fell into silence. She was shaking. You don't ever say that again, she hissed. Not after everything we've shared. Not after everything I gave you. Carl's face was turned to the side, his cheek already red. Slowly, he turned back to her. His jaw twitched. His eyes were wild. You're not my wife, he said. You're right, she replied, voice hollow. Not anymore. She turned to walk away. That's when he grabbed her arm. His grip on her arm was tight, too tight, the kind that doesn't come from impulse, but from something darker, festering under the skin. Marilyn let out a sharp breath, twisting, trying to pull away. Carl, she warned, voice low, tense. Let me go. But Carl didn't let go. He yanked her back toward him with a force that surprised even himself. Her body collided with his chest, and for a moment, they were eye to eye, the fury in his staring directly into the disbelief in hers. Don't walk away from me, he snarled. You don't get to run after what you did. I didn't do anything, she snapped. I'm who I've always been. You're a liar, he shouted, voice cracking. You lied to me every day of my damn life. She shoved at him then, both hands flat against his chest. Let me go, Carl. He didn't. Instead, he pushed her back hard. Marilyn stumbled, heels catching on the edge of the rug. Her arms flailed, grabbing for the nearest thing, a chair, the wall, the air itself, but it was too late. Her back struck the sharp corner of the brick fireplace mantel with a sickening crack. Her head snapped back, and she crumpled to the floor like a rag doll, her body twisting unnaturally as she landed. The sound that followed wasn't a scream. It was worse. It was silence. Carl stood frozen. His chest heaved. His ears rang. The room seemed to close in around him. The photos on the walls, the ticking clock, the faint smell of cinnamon from the forgotten donuts on the floor. For a moment, everything felt distant, blurred. He took a step forward, heart hammering in his throat. Marilyn, he whispered. She didn't move. He dropped to his knees beside her. Her eyes were open, but not seeing. Her mouth was slightly parted, blood trickling slowly from the gash at her temple, forming a small, dark pool on the pale carpet beneath her. No, 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 Carl muttered, shaking her gently. Come on, baby. Come on. Still nothing. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. No pulse. He tried her wrist. Nothing. Her skin was already cooling. He rocked back on his heels, fingers stained crimson, eyes wide with disbelief. His breath came in shallow bursts. He looked at his hands, her blood on them, then back at her face. The woman he'd loved. The woman he'd married. The woman he had just killed. His thoughts spun out like a tornado. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. I just pushed her. She fell. She hit her head. I didn't mean to. But another voice whispered beneath the noise. You grabbed her. You lost control. You let the anger take over. You looked her in the face and you pushed her. And now she's dead. Carl stood up slowly, stumbling backward, knocking into the coffee table and sending the whiskey glass rolling across the floor. His foot caught on something, the photo album. It spilled open at his feet. There was again. Marcus. That same teenage smile. That same face. but not the same person anymore. Carl picked up the album and hurled it across the room. It slammed into the wall and fell, pages torn, pictures scattered. Then came a next thought. What now? He paced the room in circles, wiped his face, rubbed his hands on his jeans, thought about calling 911, but then what? Tell them what? That he shoved his wife into a fireplace during a screaming match about her gender identity? They'd never believe it was an accident. Not after what he'd said. Not after the bruises on her arm. Not in a town like Everwood, where gossip spread faster than wildfire and forgiveness was in short supply. His eyes flicked toward the kitchen clock. Almost 3 p.m. He had time. Maybe. His hands moved on their own, grabbing towels, a spray bottle, gloves from under the sink. He scrubbed the floor where the blood had begun to soak in, knuckles raw from the carpet fibers. He wiped down every surface, every spot where her hands had touched. He packed up the broken vase in a trash bag, double-wrapped it, and shoved it deep in the garbage bin outside. Then he stared at her body. Still there. Still her. He couldn't leave her in the house. If someone came by, if a neighbor knocked, if Tyler called, it would all unravel. So he wrapped her in a clean bedsheet, lifted her carefully, cradling her the way he used to when she was sick, when she fell asleep on the couch after long days at the salon. He carried her to the garage, put her in the back of his work truck, shut the door, and stood there, panting, soaked in sweat. The weight of what he'd done was crushing. Still, Carl whispered one thing as he walked back inside and locked the door behind him. She never should have lied. Night had fallen over Everwood like a velvet curtain, cloaking its quiet streets in stillness. Porch lights flickered on one by one. Families settled in for dinner, and the world moved on, unaware that in a pristine white Victorian at the corner of Maplewood and Dalton, a man was trying to erase a murder. Carl Benson stood in the garage, staring at the back of his pickup truck. His hands trembled. His forehead was damp. The sheet-wrapped body of Marilyn, the woman he had loved, the woman he had killed, lay in the truck bed like a ghost waiting for its story to be rewritten. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 8:47 p.m. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. His stomach twisted in knots, but adrenaline kept him upright. Logic and guilt battled in his mind, and logic was winning, for now. He opened the driver's side door and climbed in. The truck's engine roared to life, loud in the night. He backed out slowly, careful not to spin gravel or draw attention. His hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary as he headed toward Glenwood Park, a wooded area on the outskirts of town, secluded and barely patrolled at night. Marilyn had always loved Glenwood in the fall. She used to take photos of the maple trees as their leaves turned gold and crimson. Now, Carl was taking her there for the last time. He pulled off onto a gravel path, killed the headlights, and stepped out into the cool night air. Crickets chirped. A breeze rustled the trees. He walked to the back of the truck, lifted the tailgate with a groan, and just stood there. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to grow old together. Rocking chairs, gray hair, maybe a dog, maybe if God was willing a child. But all of that was gone now, buried beneath a single, irreversible act of violence. He slid her body out gently, like handling something fragile. It wasn't the first time he'd carried her, but it would be the last. She felt heavier now, not just her body, but the weight of everything she'd taken with her. The truth, the lies, the love, the betrayal. Carl carried her 30 yards off the path, toward a clearing by the creek. The moon was high now, casting silver across the grass. He laid her down beside a tree, arranged the sheet to make it look less like a bundle and more like someone asleep. He took a step back, then another. Then he ran. Back at home, Carl stripped off his clothes and stuffed them into a trash bag, double-bagged it, and shoved it deep under the workbench in the garage. He showered, scrubbing harder than necessary, as if he could peel away the guilt layer by layer. Then he sat at the kitchen table and stared at his phone. If Marilyn was missing, there had to be signs. Messages. Calls. Disruption. He sent himself a text from her phone. I need time. I'm staying with Tyler for a few days. Don't call. Then he deleted it from her phone and turned the device off. He stashed it in the glove compartment of her car, which he parked 2 blocks down the road. He walked home by moonlight, like a man returning from a grave. Inside the house, he poured himself another drink. Whiskey burned on the way down, but it dulled the edge. A little. He pulled out a notebook and started sketching a timeline. Not just for the police, for himself. He needed the story to be straight. 3 p.m., Marilyn comes home. 3:10 p.m., argument. 3:30 p.m., Marilyn storms out. Says she's going to Tyler's. Rest of day, Carl drinks, falls asleep on the couch. Wakes up around 9 o'clock, notices she's still gone. That was the story. That was the lie. He cleaned the living room, again. Vacuumed the rug. Wiped down the mantel. Disposed of the broken vase pieces at the bottom of the trash can. Bleached the hearth. He even replaced the photo album in the attic. Every trace of what had happened. Wiped clean like a chalkboard before Sunday school. Still, something gnawed at him. Would they believe it? Would Tyler? The man had always been close to Marilyn. Too close, Carl thought now. He'd always found it odd, the way Tyler toasted to the bravest woman I know at their wedding. It had seemed poetic at the time. Now it felt loaded. Carl laid awake in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan. Each spin sounded louder than the last. He replayed her voice in his mind. Her laugh. Her scent. The sound of her heels on the hardwood. He didn't cry. He wouldn't let himself. But somewhere deep inside him, something twisted. Something broke. Not just guilt. Not just grief. Something like shame. Something like relief. The next morning, he called his business partner. Hey, Jerome, Carl said, voice gravelly. Something came up. Family stuff. Marilyn's gone to stay with a friend. We had a fight. I'm gonna need to take a few days. You okay, man? Jerome asked. I will be, Carl said. I just need to clear my head. He made a few more calls. Canceled appointments. Put out the image of a man dealing with marital trouble. It wasn't hard. People believed trouble faster than perfection. By mid-morning, he answered the door for Officer Melissa Griggs, who was responding to a missing persons call. Carl played the part, worried husband confused, holding it together just barely. She left yesterday afternoon, he said. Said she needed space. I thought she was with a friend, but no one's heard from her. She's not answering calls. Has she done anything like this before? The officer asked. Carl shook his head. Never. She took down the information. Name, height, last outfit worn, photo from their wedding. Carl watched her write it all down with a calm hand, unaware that the truth was buried 30 yards from a park trail. After she left, he sat in the silence of the house. A house now too quiet, too clean, too empty. And even though the body was gone, and the blood was scrubbed away, and the story rehearsed to perfection, Carl Benson knew one thing for certain. The truth had a way of rising, no matter how deep you buried it. The fog still clung to the edges of Glenwood Park as the sun began to stretch across the treetops. It was the kind of crisp Georgia morning that smelled of wet earth and pine needles. The birds hadn't yet begun their chatter when Evelyn Raines, a retired schoolteacher and lifelong early riser, zipped up her windbreaker and started her morning walk along the trail. She'd taken this same route for over 15 years. Knew every bend, every broken branch, every squirrel family. But that morning, something was off. About 50 yards in, Evelyn paused. Someone, was lying just off the trail under a patch of sycamore trees. At first, she thought it was a drunk teen, or maybe a homeless person. But as she crept closer, the stillness of the body told her otherwise. The woman was wrapped in a sheet, motionless, one hand exposed, a wedding ring on her finger, glinting faintly in the early light. Evelyn's scream echoed through the woods like a gunshot. By 6:35 a.m., the entire area was taped off, red and blue lights bouncing off the tree trunks. Police cruisers lined the gravel path like a funeral procession. Birds now watched from high branches, silent. Detective Frank Delaney, gray-templed and sharp-eyed, pulled into the scene in an unmarked Crown Victoria. He was sipping black coffee from a battered thermos and thumbing through a thin case folder on a burglary when the call came in. Female body found. Probable homicide. That changed everything. He parked, stepped out, and ducked under the yellow tape. Morning, Frank, said Officer Ramirez, nodding solemnly. She's over here. The medical examiner, Naomi Briggs, already knelt beside the body, latex gloves dusted with soil and moisture. She looked up as Frank approached. Doc, he said, what are we looking at? Female, early 30s, Naomi replied. Blunt force trauma to the head. But see here, she gently pulled back the sheet just enough to reveal faint bruising along the throat. Also signs of strangulation. Defensive wounds on her hands, consistent with a struggle. She fought back. Frank exhaled through his nose. Time of death. Likely between late afternoon and early evening yesterday, Naomi said. She's been out here at least 12 hours. Body was moved post-mortem. Someone tried to make it look like she laid down and disappeared. Frank's eyes scanned the scene. The carefully placed sheet, the undisturbed grass beneath her. Too clean, too deliberate. This wasn't random, he muttered. This was personal. Naomi pulled back the cloth fully from the woman's face. Frank stiffened. He'd seen that face before. Framed in the window of Marilyn's Touch, smiling from local magazine covers, offering style tips on morning news segments. Everyone in town knew Marilyn Benson. And now she was dead. By 7:10 a.m., Marilyn's identity was confirmed, and a wave of quiet dread rippled through the small Everwood Police Department. Not just because she was a public figure, but because her husband, Carl Benson, was one of the town's most respected contractors. Delaney had a pit in his gut. Not suspicion, not yet, but experience had taught him one thing. When a woman ends up dead, the husband is never far from the truth. By the time Carl Benson opened his front door that morning, the birds were already singing too loud, and the sky was too blue for what was coming. He hadn't slept. Not really. He drifted in and out of shallow haze on the living room couch, fully dressed, waiting, not sure for what. Maybe a call. Maybe a knock. Maybe Marilyn to walk through the door like this was all a bad dream. Instead, at 8:23 a.m. sharp, the knock came. And it wasn't gentle. Carl wiped his hands on his jeans before opening the door, working to keep his face neutral. Detective Frank Delaney stood on the porch, a man who looked like he'd seen too many dead bodies and forgotten how to smile. Next to him stood Officer Ramirez, arms folded, eyes scanning the front lawn like it could confess something. Mr. Benson, Delaney said, showing his badge, Detective Delaney. Mind if we come in? Carl's heart didn't just skip, it dropped. Straight through his chest. But his voice stayed calm. Sure, he said, stepping aside. Everything okay? Delaney crossed the threshold, scanning the foyer like it was a crime scene already. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Carl led them into the living room. The same room he'd scrubbed on his knees. The same room where Marilyn's blood had soaked into the rug. Please, Carl said, gesturing to the armchairs. What's going on? Delaney didn't sit. There was a body found early this morning in Glenwood Park, he said. We believe it's your wife. Carl blinked once. Then again. I'm sorry, what? We're still waiting on formal identification, Delaney continued, voice steady. But she was found wearing a wedding ring, wrapped in a sheet. Same build, same facial features. We've already had one of our officers match the description with her driver's license. Carl sat slowly on the edge of the couch, hands shaking just enough to look convincing. No, he whispered. No, she said she needed space. She texted me yesterday that she was staying with a friend. I thought she'd be back today. Delaney watched him. Not his words, his eyes, his posture, his pauses. Which friend? He asked. Tyler. Carl answered too fast. Tyler Moore. He and Marilyn have been close for years. And you didn't call the police when she didn't come home? Carl licked his lips. I thought, people need air sometimes. We argued. She's never done this before, but I didn't want to make a big deal. Delaney nodded once. A beat of silence. When was the last time you saw her? Carl exhaled sharply, as if reliving it hurt. Yesterday afternoon. Around 3. She came home early. We argued. She was upset. Said she needed time. Grabbed a bag and left. Did she take her car? Carl hesitated too long, and Delaney caught it. No, he said finally. She walked. Said she wanted to clear her head. And she didn't come back? No. Did she say anything else? Carl looked down at his hands. Just that she didn't feel like I really knew her anymore. Delaney's eyes flicked toward the mantel. The framed photos. The spotless carpet. The lingering scent of bleach trying too hard to smell like lemon. Can we take a quick look around? He asked, polite but firm. Just standard procedure. Sometimes missing persons leave notes. Things that don't seem important at first. Carl hesitated again, then forced a smile that barely touched his lips. Of course. Go ahead. As Delaney moved through the house, Carl sat still on the couch, every muscle in his body screaming to bolt. But he didn't move. He couldn't. His jaw clenched, ears ringing, heart pounding. In the hallway, Delaney bent slightly and ran his finger along the baseboard. Still damp. Freshly wiped. In the laundry room, he noticed a trash bag shoved behind the water heater, double bag tied tight. He made a mental note. And in the living room, he found the one thing Carl had missed, a tiny shard of porcelain from the broken vase, wedged between two floorboards beneath the rug. He didn't say a word. Not yet. Instead, he returned to the entryway, where Carl was still seated, knuckles white. We'll be in touch, Delaney said. Once we get formal identification, we'll need you to come by and make a statement. Carl nodded slowly, eyes glazed. Of course. Anything you need. But as the front door clicked shut behind the detective, Carl knew they didn't need anything else. They were already looking, already circling, and somewhere deep in the marrow of his bones, Carl Benson understood. The lie was unraveling. Detective Frank Delaney didn't leave Carl Benson's house and head straight back to the station. He drove in silence for 5 minutes, then pulled into the narrow parking lot behind the county medical examiner's office. The air was still thick with morning dew, and the smell of pine and formaldehyde lingered faintly near the back entrance. Inside, Dr. Naomi Briggs was hunched over the exam table, gloved hands steady, her eyes focused on the bruises around Marilyn's neck. She didn't look up when Frank entered. You ever seen something like this? He asked, nodding toward the body. Naomi sighed and peeled off one glove. I've seen worse, but not in Everwood. Delaney leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Time of death. Between 4 o'clock and 6 p.m. yesterday. Blunt force trauma likely came first. The wound on the temple is deep, corner impact, maybe a fireplace mantle. But the strangulation came after. Pressure points are consistent with manual force. Meaning whoever did this didn't stop at the fall. Delaney's jaw tightened. So she was alive when she hit her head? Maybe, Naomi said. Or maybe she was unconscious, but still breathing. The killer made sure she didn't get up again. Delaney stared at the floor a long moment. That house was too clean. Naomi nodded. Too clean usually means someone's trying too hard to forget what happened. Frank looked up. You knew her, didn't you? Naomi hesitated. Yes, she said finally. Not closely, but enough. We had coffee a few times. I respected her. And you knew she was transgender. Naomi met his gaze. I did. She trusted me with that. So did Tyler. Frank's brows raised slightly. Tyler Moore. She nodded. He was one of the first people in town she opened up to. Delaney pushed off the wall. Then he's the next person I need to talk to. Tyler Moore answered the door in sweatpants and a faded hoodie, eyes swollen like he hadn't slept. His hands trembled as he held the door open. Detective, he said, voice hoarse. Is it true? Delaney stepped inside. We found her body this morning. Tyler turned away, covering his face with one hand. His body folded under the weight of grief. I told her not to go back, he whispered. I told her. Frank sat across from him in the small, book-stuffed living room. She came to you before she returned home? Tyler nodded. Day before yesterday. She said Carl had found something. Old photos. Papers from before her transition. She was terrified. What exactly did she say? That he looked at her like she was a stranger. That he didn't speak. He just stared at her like she was filth. I told her to stay here, give him space. But she said she couldn't leave things like that. She said if she wanted any chance at saving their marriage, she had to face him. Delaney took notes slowly, deliberately. And that was the last time you saw her? Tyler nodded, wiping his eyes. She said she'd come back here afterward, no matter how it went. But she never did. No. Delaney leaned forward. Did she ever say Carl was violent? Tyler shook his head. Not physically, but he had this way of talking. Like everything had to fit into his world or it was wrong. He could be cold, controlling. Delaney stood up. If you think of anything else, anything at all, you call me. Tyler followed him to the door, voice cracking. She didn't deserve this. She survived everything: rejection, surgery, starting over. And she gets killed by the man who claimed to love her. Delaney paused in the doorway. Sometimes the worst monsters are the ones who think they're right. Back in his car, Frank sat still for a moment, turning everything over in his mind. Carl had lied. Not directly, not openly, but lies of omission were louder in a town like this. The house was too sterile. His timeline was too perfect. And now, with both Naomi and Tyler confirming Marilyn's identity and a likely motive, Delaney felt the case closing in. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Yeah," he said when dispatch answered. "Give me a search warrant for 402 Maplewood Drive. And call forensics. We're going back in." The afternoon light was slipping through the clouds when Detective Frank Delaney returned to 402 Maplewood Drive, this time with a small caravan of Everwood's forensic team in tow. Yellow tape went up around the white Victorian like a scarlet letter, neighbors peeking from behind curtains, whispering. Carl Benson stood in the doorway, jaw tight, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked smaller than the day before, as if the house itself had begun to consume him. "You got a warrant?" he asked, voice clipped. Delaney held it up without breaking eye contact. "We do." "Step aside, Mr. Benson." Carl hesitated. For half a breath, he looked like a man about to slam the door and run. But he stepped aside, because there was nowhere to go. The forensic team moved like clockwork. One pair headed for the living room, another for the garage, the laundry room, the upstairs hallway. Cameras flashed. Bags of evidence were labeled and sealed. Delaney trailed behind them, eyes scanning for the smallest thing out of place. "Living room first," he said. "This is where it happened." "Where what happened?" Carl snapped from behind him. Delaney didn't answer. He crouched by the fireplace, running his fingers along the corner of the mantel. The angle was sharp, perfect for a head injury like the one in Naomi's report. A technician knelt nearby, peeling back the edge of the rug Carl had scrubbed so carefully. Underneath, a faint brownish stain remained, too light to see at a glance, but unmistakable under the forensic lamp. Blood, the tech confirmed. Not fresh, maybe a day old. Carl swallowed hard. "She had a nosebleed a couple weeks ago," he blurted. "Right there. I cleaned it." Delaney looked up slowly. "A couple weeks ago?" Carl's mouth opened, then shut. In the garage, another technician called out. "Detective, you'll want to see this." They had found a double-bag trash sack shoved behind the water heater. Inside, a set of men's jeans, a t-shirt, and a pair of work boots, all stained with traces of blood. "Looks like bleach," the tech said, holding the clothes up with tongs. "But you can't scrub out everything." Carl's voice cracked. That's mine. I wore that last week. Delaney's voice cut through the air. "Stop talking, Carl. For your own sake." Carl went pale. By the time they opened the trunk of Carl's work truck, the weight of the evidence was suffocating. More trace blood was found under the bed liner, nearly invisible to the eye, but glowing bright under luminol. And nestled in the corner, stuck in the rubber groove, was a single strand of long black hair, still glossy, still clinging to a fragment of white cotton thread. Marilyn. Delaney stepped back, heart pounding with grim confirmation. Every instinct had been right. He turned to Carl, who stood rooted in the driveway, neighbors watching from a safe distance like they were at a public hanging. Carl's eyes darted to the police cars, the cameras, the bags of evidence. He looked like a man whose walls were closing in. "Detective," he started, voice trembling. "You don't understand. She lied to me. For years. Delaney's voice was firm, final. "Mr. Benson, I'm not here to judge your marriage. I'm here because your wife is dead, and the evidence points here." He nodded to Ramirez, who stepped forward with cuffs. Carl raised his hands instinctively, backing away. "Wait, no, this isn't what you think. I didn't mean to." "Carl Benson," Delaney said, reading him his rights as the cuffs clicked shut. "You are under arrest for the murder of Marilyn Benson." The neighbors whispered louder as Carl was led down the front steps. He looked up at the windows of the house he had tried so hard to keep perfect, and for the first time the facade cracked. The lie was gone, and the truth was now carved into every inch of 402 Maplewood Drive. The interrogation room at Everwood PD was small, windowless, and cold. the kind of place that stripped a man down to nothing but his guilt. Carl Benson sat at the steel table, wrists cuffed, sweat gathering at his brow despite the chill. Across from him, Detective Frank Delaney leaned forward with the patience of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. "You want to tell me what happened?" Delaney asked quietly. Carl said nothing at first. His fingers twitched against the cuffs. His mouth opened, then closed. For a long time, he just stared at the floor like it held all the answers he'd never wanted to find. Then, finally he spoke. "She lied to me," Carl muttered, voice barely above a whisper. 5 years. 5 damn years. She was never who she said she was. Delaney didn't respond. He just let the silence hang there like a noose. Carl's voice rose, cracking. "I found the photos. The documents. That boy, Marcus. And when I looked at her, I didn't see my wife anymore. I saw a stranger." He took a shaky breath. "I confronted her. She tried to explain. Said she was still the same. That she loved me. But I couldn't hear it. I couldn't," his voice caught. "We yelled. She slapped me. I pushed her. Just one push. She tripped. Hit her head." Delaney's eyes stayed on him, steady. "And then—" "I panicked," Carl whispered. "She wasn't breathing. I tried, I really did. But she was gone. And He looked up, eyes red, hollow. "I didn't want the world to know. Not like that. Not about her. Not about me." Delaney nodded slowly. "You didn't just panic, Carl. You cleaned the scene. Moved the body. Lied to every officer that came to your door." Carl swallowed hard. "I thought if I could bury her past, maybe I could bury mine too." The tape recorder clicked off. And just like that, Carl Benson's perfect world, the house, the reputation, the marriage, came crashing down under the weight of a truth too heavy to carry.